I want to give you a brief introduction to this part of the interview with my father, Dwight Childers, in 1973. In this part of the interview, he talks about Couch's Creek. Couch's Creek, of course, is a creek, but more importantly, it was a community in a cove of Swain County, North Carolina. It's a few miles north of Cherokee on Highway 441. I'm going to provide you a link here so that you can explore. If you're interested in exploring it further, you can find out more precisely where it is and what it is. Principally, this part of the interview covers his memories of what was apparently a wonderful childhood, as he tells it, in that remote cove where the Childers family lived from, we think, before 1900 until at least about 1920, or possibly off and on for some years after that. The unusual thing about this place is that it's currently now in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. That has advantages and disadvantages. The advantage, obviously, is it's public land. You can go there whenever you want to. The disadvantage is that when the park was organized, they removed old buildings. So there isn't anything really to see except stone heaps where chimneys fell down. Or in the case of the Childers place, there is a cavity in a hillside where we know that they had their root cellar. Unfortunately, we don't have pictures we're sure of what the house or the houses that were in there looked like. We have glimpses in some old photographs which we've discovered recently. Here's a pose, some of the four older children posing in a tree with a house, part of a house wall in the background. Now, we know this picture was taken before about October of 1918 because, unfortunately, the older daughters, Edna and Emma, died as a result of the Spanish flu. Emma first, and then Edna a few weeks later. I'll just tell you who's who here. At the top is the oldest son, Francis David Childers. Then after him, just below him, is the second child, Joseph Ezekiel Childers. And then Edna is on your right as you look at the picture, and right beside her is her younger sister, Emma. We don't really know who the other people are in the photograph at all. Of course, we can't prove that the house is actually the Couch's Creek house, but it does make sense in a way. They were gathered there, perhaps with children from the cove, from other families. We just don't know about that. Two other photographs are pictures of Joseph Ezekiel and his wife Connie around the time of their marriage. In about a year later, that is after the two girls died, Joe came back from the war and married Connie about October of 1919. We believe these are close to the wedding in timing because they're wearing the same clothes that they wore in some other photographs, which we know to have been wedding photographs. So both of these photographs show them posed differently in the same clothes against a house, kind of a roughly built mountain cabin, probably. I should go back to that first photograph for a moment. A young man's head he's lost his head, let's say. If you look carefully between Edna and Emma, you will see a hole in the photograph, and all that remains is a collar and a tie. There must be a wonderful mystery there, but we have no idea what that is. Some of us went for a visit 2 years ago in April 2016. The four of us posed here are from left to right, my older brother Gerald, then cousin Steve Childers, and then cousin Gary Wooten, and then me. The photographer is my husband, Ben Ra, who patiently followed us around on this and watched us, I guess, exude enthusiasm for the old home place and photographed us in various candid poses. And here's one of me posed in front of that cavity where the root cellar was located. One other clue we have that might give a hint of what the house looked like where they lived is a similar house that my parents purchased after my father retired from work, and a couple of miles from where they lived in North Buncombe County. It was a modest cost, and they thought it might be a good investment. But Daddy clearly just was charmed by it because, as he often said, it reminded him of a house on Couch's Creek. We know that those Couch's Creek houses are what is called box built, and this house is too. That is, there is no framework in the walls. There's no studs to hold the walls up. There's an exterior layer of boards, and then nailed to those or on the inside are horizontal boards. That makes a wall, not very well insulated, mind you, but it makes a wall that is pretty inexpensive, not much in the way of material and not much labor either. So here that you're seeing photographs of this house, which we think is similar to the houses that existed back in the cove of Couch's Creek. And there's one here of my father sitting on the porch, as he often did, after he'd finished his chores of mowing the lawn or working a little bit on the springs to keep the water flowing. He loved to sit and probably, we're guessing, probably remember life on Couch's Creek. This photo is by my younger brother, Hoyt, and is probably from the late 1980s, maybe the early 1990s, probably from that time. That's it, I think. I hope you will enjoy the portion of the interview about Couch's Creek as much as I do when I listen to it.
We raised the most stuff what we eat. We had cattle, and back that time you didn't have pastures. You had your crop stand, and everybody let the cattle run in the mountains, the sheep and the hogs, and they had a mark. I didn't know what his mark was, but I can't think of it now. They'd mark the hog's ears and the cattle ears. Every man had that different mark, you see, and so they'd have
a brand. Did
yeah,
brand do it
no,
by
they didn't brand, They cut a nick out in the ear. You see, whatever shape and mark. Every man had a mark, just like in the West they have a brand.
Yeah.
But they had a mark, and they marked the hogs when they turned them loose. Then when they round them up in the fall, if they got somebody's hog, they'd turn it loose. And there wasn't much rustling or anything going on then. Most people through there was honest, you know, and they just had some way of identifying their stock. And we had sheep and hogs, and raised most of the stuff we eat. We picked berries in the wintertime and canned, and made dried fruit. We had our apples, all the apples we wanted, and we dried fruit. Well, back then most people they'd kill it. Of course, in wintertime they could keep it long.
Yeah.
But when they killed their hogs, now they dried this.
Yeah, I know about that.
They had their smokehouse and salt. They cured them with salt and dried the meat.
I was wondering
But
about.
a sheep, I think most of them they just keep it. They divide it out among neighbors, you know.
I see.
When
One
they
or
kill
kill
a sheep, they divide it among
have it
neighbors.
fresh.
And then another when they got that eat up, another neighbor would kill a sheep and divide that out. So that is the way they had meat all the time. And then later on, he'd kill a cow once in a while.
They do the same
Sell it
thing
out.
there.
Sell it out, you know. But he made
So about all you needed money for was
haul a little. Well, they'd take a little tan bark or cross ties or things like that to Whittier, see, that nearest railroad. And they take the most of it up in groceries. But the
Just
Jenkins,
not even having it.
they had
No,
a general store down there,
no
and the man
money.
bought it, see.
change
There wasn't
hands.
much money going on, very little money in circulation.
I didn't realize that now.
Yeah, they traded, see,
Yeah.
it's more or less of trading, see.
Yeah.
And you wanted a gallon of kerosene oil, I took a chick in the store many times and got a gallon of kerosene oil. Things like that. That they'd have to have, coffee and children, things like that.
In other words, was there any such thing as taxes, income tax or property
No,
tax? Or
no,
any of that?
not that I know of back in them days. They didn't make enough income.
Yeah.
They
you
had
didn't-
no income.
So what
And the
about?
property tax was so little that it didn't amount to much back then, back in the mountains like that.
What about voting? Did people go to the polls and vote back? Like you remember your father when you were a little boy? When there was a
I never did
presidential
hear
election, was it a big
him
thing?
speak about voting. Now I don't believe that way back there no anything that wasn't voting or anything.
That's
He's
really kind of-
Republican all of his life, or since I can remember. But
No,
the things I remember about the most was riding to the field and back in a sled, drawn by oxen. Oh, I did. I remember about that more than anything. Remember about the sled runners going up over the rocks, you know, and up one side to the other. And the oxen, they was pulling so slow it wasn't no danger, you know.
Yeah.
And it took me to death to go with ride that sled on the hillside to gather corn, you see. To gather all the corn with oxen.
And I was
Yeah.
back up in there.
Up on
somewhere.
that mountain there. Up on that mountain. And then up in the cold. I'd like to sometime, if we could, is go back there sometime pretty soon and go up in the cold. Get Gerald to go with us. Show you where we used to have a field up there. And the apples. And that's where I was born. In a one room log house.
On you were
But
after
we
you were born.
lived earlier than that now, up in the cove. The cove in a one-room log house. Yeah, that's where I was born. No, the last time I was up there, the barn was there. There was an old log barn there. So I doubt if there's anything there because the park officials burned up and tore up every house that was in the mountains. They done away with them. They could keep people from sleeping in and camping in. Yeah, we done most of half of our farm in what we call the cove on in above where we. He had over 100 acres, something over 100 acres. Yeah, he bought it. I think he paid $1.50 an acre, something like that.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, and I believe he said $1.50 an acre. There was a surveyor that worked out of Bryson City somewhere there that they got to come in and survey. But a lot of them old tracts of land had a deed that dated way back, you know, years back.
Yeah.
But I don't remember us ever having a surveyor in there. They just bought it from one to the other. My daddy bought this from his brother-in-law, Aunt Sarah's husband, John Smith. He bought this from John Smith. His sister owned it before we did.
Well, I see.
We bought it from John Smith. She was older than my daddy. She was the oldest one, I think. She was his half-sister. Oh, I think they bought it after they were married. That was
Back,
before they had any children. Yeah, that's
1890s,
that's
somewhere in
before
there,
my
probably.
time. That's before I was born. See.
Yeah.
She evidently, well, she was my daddy's sister, so she was one of them, but left the home and went out on their own, you know, and bought this old mountain place.
Any name other than Couch's Creek?
No, that
Hill.
dates back as far as I can remember. There
And
was
then-
some couches. I think there was some couches lived on that creek before that. I remember anything about it, and that's where it got its name from. Some family. D. Ash was first. Well, Penn Hyde. Now Penn Hyde lived down near the mouth of the creek, and he had great long hair down on his shoulders. Penn Hyde lived there, and then there was some Rowlands lived way back in another cove there. There was several families lived on Couch's Creek at one time, and some Rowlands lived back on the east side of Couch's Creek, and then D. Ash lived on up there, and then we lived there, and then the Terry Nation lived on above us, and then Will Brown.
Is that a man?
Yeah, Terry. Yeah, Terry Nation. He raised the family up there, and then Will Brown lived on the right-hand throne, and that's where our neighbors. And when me and Gerald was up there last time, we went out and looked up to Terry Nation's old place. Gerald likes to hunt these bottles and antique bottles, and we went up there, and the only remains we could find there was an old bedstead. We did find the house place.
What about
It's all in
no
woodland.
chimney? No chimney.
And I helped Terry Nation's whole corn 20 cents an hour on them hills up there. Yeah, he worked at Mings Creek in logging job there. And he'd walk from head of Couch's Creek to Mings Creek every day and back. And Mings Creek and Couch's Creek. And we was up in there, and we went over to the Brown place, but we couldn't. I wasn't able to locate the Brown place, old house place. Well, my job was to carry water to them in the cornfield, take the dinner, you know. And I remember one day I was taking the dinner to the other older ones, you know, was working in the field. Well, that was on up the creek. We had 2 or 3 places we farmed at. It was on up the creek, another field up there. Now it's all growed up woodland. And I was crossing this creek, and I had a little old red hat on, and I was taking the dinner, and I was crossing that creek and fell in, and it lost my hat, and it washed away. This little old felt hat. And I lost that hat, and it worried me a lot, you know. But I went on and took their dinner to them. Never did find that hat. It was beans and whatever we made there on the place, you know. Beans, vegetables, and cornbread. Yeah, lard butter. That was our food then. We made our own molasses. You never seen an old cane mill, did you, today? Well, it was a horse. And I was, and my job was too, during that time, is hunting the cows in the mountains. I was evidently
you have to go early
7 or 8 then, you know, 7 or 8 or on up, I don't remember, but it's close, 7, 8 or 9 year old. Yeah, about 7, I guess. Well, we didn't get too much schooling because bad days we couldn't go, and then if they needed us to work the field, we'd have to stay there and work. And I'd take the dinner to the others in the fields, and then in the evening, later on, my job was to hunt the cows up, and I'd have to go barefooted, see, and back then there was plenty of chestnuts. I remember hitting my heel on them chestnut burrs, and I'd have to sit down and pick chestnut burrs out of my feet, and I'd go through where I could find a tanbark log. I'd walk the logs. There's a lot of vegetation in the woods, and the old cows had bells on them, and sometimes you couldn't hear them. You'd have to go up on a high ridge somewhere to hear them. Maybe they'd be on in the holler, and I'd walk them logs first and go barefooted, and get up a little kindling in the evening, you know. We time to cut, you know, they were busy working in the fields, and then we raised called that called roughness. Corn, we didn't know what happened. Yeah. Oh yeah. You feed and use the rest for bread. This old lady, her name was White. Now she was living in the Civil War, during the Civil War. She was the midwife of some of our later children, and probably me, I guess. I know she was part of the family, and I remember her very well. And we used to go up to Terry Nation's, and they had a big gate there, and they had a loose chain on it that fastened by. And she'd hear that gate open, she'd hear that chain rattle, she'd pop her head out this little scuttle hole in the house, and she had this, they called them hippies then, white cloth on her head. I never did see her head, but people said that her hair would all, she was so old, her hair would all come out some reason or other.
So she always wear that.
She always wore that white thing on her head. And no, her and Faith, her son lived there with her.
Or
Yeah, the Blow Nations. I didn't say it, but that was one Blow Nation. And yeah, I remember one time when we left there and went back. We stayed all night there and heard it the first night. First night.
From what street now?
From where we lived. And we stayed all night there and heard the first night after we come back. That must have been during the time we come back from Greenville. And I remember her baking the bread in an oven on the fire. See, they put the bread in the oven, then put a top on it, and then put coals on it and under it, and bake the bread that way. And it didn't have I remember it didn't have a speck of salt in it. You ever eat the bread with cornbread without any salt? That's corn. And she evidently was getting some kind of a little pension from her husband. That was whether he's killed in the Civil War or her died. And I've heard her tell about the soldiers coming. They had to hide the food, you know, if they kept any. The soldiers, I don't know what it was now. The other, what was the other called? The Union. That was the Indian, wasn't it?
Yeah.
They would take the people's horses and steal, just take them and ride them, you know. Or they take their food. They had their meat. They had to hide their meat. That was when she was. No, that wasn't it wasn't there. It must have evidently been somewhere else.
You don't remember where?
I don't remember where. That was in her early days, I guess. And I've heard her tell about where people used to salt their meat in the meat houses. They would scarcely salt in the Civil War, and they'd get this dirt up some way and run the salt out of it and salt the food with it. I guess she was 90 years old because Fate was an old man. Fate was older than my daddy.
Even when you went
and as well as I remember, my daddy's about in his 40s.
Yeah. So
Well, I remember now. She was evidently a pretty good sized girl during the Civil War. She was a native of that country in that somewhere. And I think she only had the one son and never did really have any other children. Miss White. But I remember her son's name was Faith White. And they must have lived on that creek before we ever moved back.
Her house
Well, it
was it an old one?
No, it was old at that time, but it had been built out of saw timber, I think. It had been sawed in there. Because she hadn't lived there all of her life. All that I knew had built their own houses in there. The ones that lived.
And they had those boys.
Now there used to be another midwife out in there with Miss Lawson. Lived down near the old church down there on the river. She delivered some of my brothers.
What was that on?
Left the river, yeah. Near Mingus Creek where we stopped at Indian Bob, you know. Or did we stop there, didn't we?
Yeah, we stopped at
Mingus Creek Mill. And she used to live down near that Mingus Creek Mill. But about half of our families was delivered by a midwife.
The nearest doctor was probably what, Bryson City?
Bryson City.
Probably just one.
Whittier in Bryson City. They rode horses and they couldn't wait for a horse to get there. So it was very common for these midwives just took care of people when they had babies.